So what we are talking about today is tax planning, just like Mike mentioned. Why tax planning? Why not something else? And frankly, it's because we were a little bit frustrated, you guys. We've been in the industry for a very long time, and this is what we see does not get talked about enough. Think about it. You know, you have a great plan, everything is going well, you know, see you next quarter. What we want to change is the status quo, and this is the first part of the 4-part series. Essentially, guys, we built a case study that we're going to continue through time. So today's tax planning, next time we're going to talk about something else with the same couple that we built. And the reason why this is important is on the next slide. Folks, what you're looking at here is a Monte Carlo simulation. You probably have heard this many times before. Oh my God, Mr. and Mrs. Client, I have run 1,000 scenarios for you, and guess what? 97% of the time you are successful. And even more so, look at that 2.5 percentile. So really, really bad market, pretty much impossible for this to happen. You're still gonna end up with almost $2.5 million in the bank at the end. Guess what happens then? What do you think happens at that point? 97% success rate, $2.5 million in the bank at the end.
Check the box.
That's it. We're done. The box is checked, right? Mr. and Mrs. Klein, good job. I will see you next time. We do not feel that that's enough. You worked really hard for your money, right? Your money needs to work for you. And every box needs to be checked, not just, you know, probability of success. So, Rob, next slide. I want to remind you folks, we're not talking about anything else today. Not investments, not estate, not how to title your assets, nothing like that. What we are discussing today is simply taxes. With that, we were able to bring up the probability of success 2% from 97 to 99. And worst case scenario went up from 2.5 million to about 3.3. This is the value of tax planning. Why do other advisors not do this? Maybe they have too many clients. Maybe they're just not competent and they don't have enough time. But today, we want to show you guys some ways that you can work with your portfolio and your taxes to go from a very successful plan, which you probably have, to something even better. So again, 99% and 3.3 million. Go to the next one.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about our case study, so you guys kind of get the look and feel for who we're talking about and how we're implementing a tax strategy to help improve their situation. So we have Marco and Marcia Polo. So they're in their 60s. They're retiring now. So big income year. They got salary. They got incentive stock options that will be coming due. So they have to address that. Then they have 2 kids, 2 grandkids, and they are also charitably inclined. So who's played around with an AI tool recently? Text to image. Has anybody yet? All right. So we asked the AI, what does a higher net worth individual look like that lives in Del Webb? And it came back and said, well, they'll be pretty good looking too, and their favorite food is pineapple. And so here's Marco, and then we got Marcia Polo. So these will be our case study we talk about. Have you seen these people around? Anybody look familiar? So, all right, so what do they got? So checking and savings, they have $350,000. Retirement and brokerage funds are split up between the 401k, IRA account, and their brokerage account. They have a whole life policy that they've been paying a premium on all their lives. And they bought their $700,000 Del Webb property that's probably worth $1 million now. And so that's the look and feel for what we're going to be talking about today. So about $4 million total net worth. Income and expenses. All right, so retirement income, we have 2 sources on Social Security. So we got Marcia, she's already taking hers. Marco, he's not sure right now. So we're gonna talk about some planning around that and when's the best time to take it. Marcia's got a pension coming in. I mentioned the incentive stock options that are gonna be paying out this year that we need to address. And then as far as expenses go, we're looking at about $83,000 in expenses and about $20,000 a year for charitable donations. All right, so who's met Irma? Irma, is she just visiting or is she staying permanently? That's the thing. So Irma, like she likes to come and stop by for a year or two, but she usually likes to stop by and move in permanently. And we're going to talk about ways that we can kind of get around that sometimes. So if you go to the next slide here. So right now the joint filing threshold is $206,000. What happens is when you exceed that, what happens to your Part B premium on your Medicare, it gets jacked up. And then if you hit another threshold, it gets jacked up more. And so it's it can get basically double, triple your costs on your medical insurance. And the problem is if you don't do the planning now, like once you get into it in your 80s, like you can't back out of it. You're there. She's living with you permanently. All right. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that with our tax planning. So
folks, this was the setup. That's the case study. Those are the fictional people that we've created, Marco and Marcia. Do you have any questions on this scenario, how it relates to you potentially? If not, what I want you to look at is this chart, and obviously it's in your packets as well. What we're looking at is their income taxes. Now, of course, keep in mind, not everything is going to apply to you. Some of this definitely will, but not all of it is going to apply to you. But take a look. They have a very high income year in 2024 due to those stock options, right? Then there's a pretty big gap where they don't really have much income at all. And then finally, later on in life, they again start having a pretty substantial amount of income. What I want you to do is try to think like us. What planning opportunities do you see? What tax opportunities do you notice right away? And feel free to just yell them out from something like this. A Roth?
there we go.
Roth conversion?
That's my girl.
Okay, we're going to talk about that. What else? Anything else you guys noticed?
What about that big tax year? Like what would you do to offset income in that big tax year?
Hey, that's it.
So it really comes down to how you do things, right? I think everybody has the right intentions of what they're trying to do, but it's not necessarily the right way to do it, right? There might be a better way to do it and get a better effect on your plan. So what we have here is in this first year, we had this huge income and we're trying to offset this income. Now, what you're seeing though is that I call it like the tax-free zone, right? From that point, 2025 until you get to 73 or 75, depending on your age. And when you have to take those mandatory withdrawals from your IRA account, most people they have after-tax money that they can live on. They got Social Security, they got pension. So the income tax years there, you're not benefiting from your $20,000 annual tax write-off. In fact, you're probably not even itemizing, right? Because the standard deduction went up so high. Well, what you can do with a donor advised fund is that you can fund it all in 1 year, and then you can take advantage of that tax write-off in the year that you need it, and then grant the money out over that time period. So simply what we did is we had 14 years of a gap times $20,000 through a $280,000 contribution into a donor advised fund. That reduced the taxable income down substantially. And then the client's going to be able to grant the $20,000 a year to the charities just like they were doing before. Instead of writing from the checkbook, they go in the donor advised fund and set up a grant. But it's going to be a much more effective way of using the tax write-off when you can actually use it and itemize it. Because a lot of times your deductions are just getting lost because the standard deduction's higher. Now, 2 years from now, what happens? Sunset, right? So a lot of things we're going to come to play where really looking at your deductions and different deduction strategies you need to definitely utilize. And so one thing that was overlooked in my career at Fidelity, I was with Fidelity for 20 years. Actually, one of my clients, one of my favorite clients, I was with them for over 13 years when I was a wealth planner there. And, a lot of times clients would, write the check to the charity, and not think about it. Like, oh, I'll get my $300 tax write-off and I'm getting my standard deduction, so it doesn't really matter, Mike. I'm like, well, it does matter. Once you hit 70 and a half, you can do what's called a qualified charitable deduction. So if you have the withdrawal come directly from your IRA account to the charity, then you can take that as an above the line deduction and take your standard deduction on top, right? That's a huge benefit. And so with that, that's what we kind of did here is rather than just writing the check off at 2035, we're basically having the IRA account pay out the $20,000 directly and then getting that above the line deduction, which helps reduce the taxes even more. So just, those two little strategies there, we're saving about $110,000 in cumulative taxes over the life of the plan. And the last part of the deductions is, bundling your deductions. Who did this before 2018? Anybody? Where you bundled your deductions together? No? Oh, cool. All right. So what happened in 2018? Where our taxes got limited to $10,000 that we could deduct, right? You lost a ton of other deductions, especially if you're like self-employed or a business owner. And so what you can do is in 2026, when the rules go back to the way they were, let's say you get your real estate taxes, right? And so what's the average here? About 7,000 to 10,000 or so, right? So what you can do is get your real estate taxes, you pay them in January, and then you pay your real estate taxes in November, all in 1 year. And you do that every other year. So 1 year you do itemized deductions, the next year you're going to do your standard deduction. And with the donor advised fund, you can use that integration here as well. You could do, instead of doing the $20,000 a year, you do $40,000 in that donor advised fund, and then you grant to the charity the next year, and then you get your real estate taxes. So then you're really maximizing that itemized deduction as much as you can. It's just a different way of doing it, right? You're not trying to beat the tax code. You're just making your payments a different way. And so that's what we try to bring to light to people is what's the better way to do it? Are you doing it the right way? And so, go to the next one. So we'll go to optimizing Social Security with Creel.
So this one applies to pretty much everyone. And I want to ask you guys again, when do people normally want to take their Social Security? What do you think the average thing we see? When do they want to start?
When did you guys start? Who's taking Social Security now? Okay.
When did you start? At what age?
What age is it?
That's a good one. That's right. But most often, guys, what we see is that people want to take Social Security as early as possible. And there's many different reasons for that. But in general, I'd say that's the average. As soon as I'm eligible, I'm going to start taking it. We want you to consider that in this scenario right here, we have both Marco and Marcia taking it as soon as they're eligible, at 62. Now, there's two things that I want you to take away from this. One, of course, there's more to Social Security planning than what we're going to talk about taxes here. Because if one spouse delays Social Security, right, it usually allows the other spouse that started taking it earlier to rely on that higher payout later in life. So do not think of this scenario as something that can be just taken as gospel. Every situation is a little bit different, but in general, if you split it this way, so somebody takes it early, someone takes it later, there's a planning opportunity there for the surviving spouse. But what we do want to point out is that it does make a pretty big difference taxation-wise. And here's that opportunity. I don't know if you could see it pretty well, but here we have Marco delaying his until he's 70, right? And we have Marcia taking hers as soon as she can. So again, this does allow for the planning opportunity of Marcia having higher income later in life if something were to happen to Marco. So again, a big deal, but One other thing to pay attention to, look at the lines. Those lines, folks, those are tax brackets. And notice too, that 22 and 25, the red bracket, that's with the sunset, the new bracket will be 25. Because there's going to be no Social Security coming in for that period of time for Marco, it allows to not have a lot of income. Oh, she gets it. So we can use that amount of income not included into our Roth conversions. So people don't think of it like that often, but it is a huge planning opportunity where we again have a gap that we can utilize in those Roth conversions that Mike is about to talk about. These are just the numbers. On the left, we have Social Security with taking it as early as possible. On the right, we have Social Security, or the numbers rather, if you take Social Security later, delayed it for Marco. Go to the next one.
There's not as much tax savings though. Why?
We'll see. There's more assets. But this is kind of addressing the argument, what if I don't live very long? The break-even point runs at about 80. So as you can see by the numbers, they're pretty much even if the spouse makes it to that age.
So one of you lives to 80.
Correct.
Yep.
Go ahead, Rob.
All right, Roth conversion. So when I was at Fidelity, my last 2 years there, I was a wealth planner. And so I worked with clients that had assets of about $3 to $10 million. And I was on the initial team when Fidelity bought eMoney Advisor. I was on the beta and pilot national rollout and kind of orchestrated that process. And so with that, one of the things that I love about eMoney Advisors is the ability to model in pretty much like any scenario that you can think of. Roth conversions being one of those really opened my eyes on the power of a Roth IRA account. It's insane once you see some of these numbers. Every situation is different. Not everybody's going to have a Roth conversion all in 1 year, or it could be over your lifetime. I've had a $3.7 million Roth conversion in 1 year, but it made sense tax-wise. But other people that we've done it could be a conversion that's over a 15-year period of time. Our job is to help you find that optimal point of what's the best tax bracket to go up to, and then how long it's going to take you to do that conversion, okay? So this is where, basically that blue line at the top where the yellow lines kind of hit, that's the 24 to 28% tax bracket. So we kind of did some pre-work for you guys, already figured out which tax bracket works best in this scenario. But what my job is to do is to go in here and literally go through every tax bracket, layer it out, and look at all the different times, integrate it with the other tax planning strategies to see, okay, what's the optimal point for the client, right? And so with this client, basically, we converted enough of the IRA accounts to get to that point, but I did leave enough in the IRA account for this qualified charitable disbursements later on, because we still want to get that tax write-off. And what do you notice about this tax table that's different from the other tax tables? Anything weird? This is what kind of shocked me, like when I first ran through the analysis years ago. And I was like, is this right? And I called the help desk. I'm like, hey, I don't think I'm reading this right. And he's like, no, that's right. I'm like, you mean they don't have any more taxable income for the rest of their life? Yep. That's insane. And so everybody's situation is different, because you might have a taxable pension that's coming in, you might have rental income from a property. Everybody's situation is a little bit different. But for the vast majority of people with attributes like our case study, this will work potentially for you. And we can run through that analysis to see if it actually works. So in this situation, basically, we converted the vast majority of the taxable pre-tax IRA account, left enough money in the IRA account just for the QCDs, and literally you see the taxable income drop off the map. So he saved $359,000 in cumulative taxes. He has $706,000 in more assets left at the end of the plan. Now, let me ask you a question. If you had $1 million in a Roth IRA tax-free versus $1 million in a pre-tax IRA, which one's worth more? Right? That Roth. So when we look at these plan assets and we say how much money is left over at the end of the plan, and it was like 3.3 on our plan and 2.5 on the other plan, you know, all of our assets are tax-free, right? So it's worth a lot more than just that $700,000 difference. And so really big differences you can make on your plans by using tax planning to your advantage, working with an advisor that's going to show you the ropes, verify it with a CPA, make sure you're doing the right things, and orchestrate it for you and implement it. You can talk all you want, but it's a matter of implementing and doing the right things, and that's what we're trying to help out with.
So what was all of this work, you guys? Now, we dressed up in suits, we talked your ear off about every strategy possible that we could find, but where does the rubber actually meet the road? So on the left, we have that chart that we showed you early on when I try to ask you, you know, what opportunities can you find, right? With the really high income early on, with the gap, and then the higher income later on as well. And then after is really hard to believe, just like Mike pointed out. But notice how past 2033, really there is no taxes. So that's really what we're trying to get people to. People that can afford it, people that have the right situation. This is where you want to be, where you have a plan that later on in life, you're in a tax advantage position.
Did Irma move in?
No.
No. She visited for a little bit. So she did visit for a little bit, but once we got past our conversions, she's not visiting anymore. So
this one again, kind of visualizing what Mike mentioned, right? On the left-hand side, this is only looking at their retirement assets. So no house, nothing like that. So on the left-hand side, you notice that the 401k and the IRA are coming up to about $2.5 million. Again, to Mike's question, what is worth more? $2.5 million in money that is still attached to the tax code, or about $4 million in a tax-free account. And notice too, that light blue shaded drawdown, that's what Mike was talking about with the QCD. We don't want to run out of it too quickly, realize too many taxes, so that how far the planning goes all the way to the end of the month.
Yeah, I mean, you could have, if you don't have long-term care insurance, leave enough in the rollover IRA account for medical expenses down the road. You'll get the tax write-off for that, right? You could have your advisory expenses taken out of the pre-tax IRA account. So there's a couple different things you can leave in the pre-tax account, kind of, for future deductions and what have you. So, all right. We got Rob the man here. So what we're going to do here, for the presentation that we're going to do next time, we're going to be talking about risk assessment. We use a system called Nitrogen, which used to be called Riskalyze. And what it does is it helps us quantify the kind of think of it like how fast your investments are driving, right? A lot of times people, they get into this investment and then, hey, markets go up, everything's great. Well, market goes down, it goes down fast, right? And so we want to help you understand, how fast are you actually driving with your investments? So for today, what we're going to do, to segue into our next presentation, we're going to do a group risk questionnaire, all right? And so we want everybody to kind of help out with the answers on this. Then next time we come, we're going to actually build out the portfolio that aligns with that risk score and then model it into eMoney to show you the impact.